A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your servant who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here immediately and take your place at table'? Would he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished'? Is he grateful to that servant because he did what was commanded? So it should be with you. When you have done all you have been commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do.'" The Gospel of the Lord. This Gospel reading begins with faith and moves through the meaning of faithful service and concludes really with humility. And there is a deep relationship between all three of those. And the words of this gospel have come to speak much more deeply to me as I have grown older, realizing, looking back, that I have been called to the service of the Lord and the service of his people in ways that are not always my choosing. I have chosen to answer that call way back when. I have continued to renew that call in my own life and my own heart. And yet I realize that as I am fulfilling the service that I have been called to, as a priest, yes, but also, quite frankly, as a Christian. So I'm not just talking about myself. I'm talking about the call that you have as well as I do. You have that call through your baptism and confirmation to unite with Jesus Christ in the way that you are becoming one in faith with him as servant of God, as servant of one another within the church, and within the church as servant to the world. In fact, one of the wonderful insights that I think is important for the life of each one of us is that what Jesus means to us, we as members of his body mean to the world. As we experience Jesus bringing his life through so many ways into our lives and drawing us together as his body, the church, our mission as church is to do the very same thing in the world. As Jesus brings the love of God to us, we are empowered and sent to bring the love of God concretely, manifested in our works of service, into our world. We look around and we see the world still so much needs the love of God. And we seem to be powerless to discover effective ways to bring that love into our world that it may transform our world. Then again, we also seem to be sluggish to let Jesus bring the love of God into our lives in a way that transforms our lives from being lived for ourselves to being lived for Him and for one another. So we keep trying. And I think this is where faith comes in. Because faith is essentially the realization, and the realization really of what we cannot do of ourselves. That moves to the trust that He will do for us and in us what we are incapable of. And the trust that if we do put our effort behind it, even though we cannot ourselves transform the world, He can transform the world through us. But we've got to be there, working in our world for Him so that He can transform the world. Otherwise, we all become simply isolated little cells, not really accomplishing anything except kind of for our own selves and our own little circle. Once we open ourselves up to Him for faith, in faith, He can move mountains. It's not we who move the mountains in faith. It's not we who say to the mulberry, it's not we who plant the mulberry seed into the sea. It's He. He does it. But we need to have faith that He will work in and through us. But we realize as we grow older, I certainly do, that when all is said and done, I have not been as diligent, as faithful, as alert, as consistent as I should be. None of us have been. That's the human condition, isn't it? So I think the final words there speak very much to me. When you have done all that you have been commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do. But there is a sequel to that, because that opens us up in that one virtue that opens wide the door to everything else. The virtue that opens wide the door to everything else is humility. And humility is nothing other than recognizing the reality of the imperfection of our relationship with God and with one another. And if we allow ourselves to trust God through those imperfections, it is God who will move mountains in us and through us.